hopefully you can all see that slide. And so Lucy has very helpfully already said some of these things already, but yeah, just to request that you keep your mic turned to mute. And that doesn't mean that this will not be an interactive participatory session. There's going to be lots of opportunities for you guys to share and talk, but it just helps to avoid any feedback. It's really lovely to see your faces. Of course, only have your video on if you feel comfortable, but it's also really nice, I think, for when we're facilitating sessions to feel like we get some of that feedback from people and can see their faces. So thank you. I know lots of you have got a pen and paper. I was joking at the beginning, it makes me feel pressure to say something very impressive, but you are going to also get the slides afterwards, so I'll send them around as a PDF. And it would be really lovely just in the next few moments if you can just pop in the chat the context with which you're using online facilitation. I'd love to hear a bit about what's kind of brought you to the session and why you're hoping to learn a bit more about virtual facilitation. So yeah, at some point in the next few minutes, feel free to do that. And just to say very briefly as well, my link to the Eden Project Community Network, and like Lucy said, I was at one of the camps. So I came in September last year. This is a photo of the street party that I've organised for the past 4 years on my road. This was the one most recently, so this was a year ago, and it was the first time in 4 years that it like actually felt like a thing. I think in all of those years leading up to it, I was like, what even is this? And then we had a really lovely year. We had a collaboration with a local school who did an art project. We had a charity selling donuts made from waste food. It was great. It was really awesome. And then really sadly, I left the area and I've moved. So now it's like a real test of kind of handing over control to other neighbours and like seeing how they take that forward. So I'm hoping they might do something for the virtual big lunch this year. And just to mention Gweno, who's been introduced already, so she's here as tech support, so she's going to be the person to speak to if you have any issues, and it looks like you've all found the chat functionality, which is great. And just to mention that you can drop down, use the drop down functionality to message directly to Gweno. So if you have got problems with tech, or you're not quite sure what I'm mentioning, or you can't find something that I'm describing, you can directly choose to message Gweno and she will help you out. If at any point you get disconnected from the meeting, which obviously can happen, I know some of you are in more rural areas where, who knows, maybe the Wi-Fi will cut out. You should just be able to rejoin the meeting by clicking that link. And if you have any issues with that, drop a message to Gweno. Her email address is there. It's also on the email that we sent out before this session. So any problems at all, you can drop her a line. And then just a few things around how we will be using Zoom. Obviously, lots of you will have been maybe having far too much Zoom time. And so there'll probably be different levels of comfort with using it, but I'll just explain a few things we'll be doing today. That is a photo on the screen of my virtual choir that has been meeting every week for the last 10 weeks. There's like 75 of us who tune in on a Thursday night. But as you can imagine, it took us some time to figure out how to do choir on Zoom. But yeah, so a few things for today. I've already mentioned about being muted, having your video on. It'll be obvious when there are times for you to contribute where I'm asking specific questions. But if at any point there is something that you want to say, just go like that. We're doing literal hands up, and I'll be keeping my eye out for those hands up, and so will Gweno and Lucy as well. So if I miss anyone, they will flag that someone's got something to say. Feel free to give feedback to what each other is saying. If someone says something that you really agree with, you can give a thumbs up like that. You can also use the emojis that you'll find along the bottom of your screen. There's a thumbs up, there's some applause. So feel free to kind of, yeah, I suppose give that interaction and feedback that we're so used to getting in the room with people, and that we can really miss, I think, when we're in these online spaces. And finally, using the chat box, which you're all doing, which is great. Cool. Can I get a thumbs up from you that all sounds okay so far? Awesome. Wicked. I'm seeing loads of thumbs up. That is lovely. Thank you very much. So the plan for our session is we're going to do some introductions and some ground rule stuff. We're then going to begin to explore the differences between online facilitation and in person, and begin to kind of pick apart what are some of the challenges we might be having and how do we respond to some of those. I will then talk a little bit about things to think about, so principles for designing, delivering, and doing follow-up around online sessions. So what are some of the key things that can really help other people to get the most out of those sessions? We'll take a quick break and then we'll talk about tips and tricks for engagement, and then there'll be some space for you guys to talk to each other about what you're taking away from the session and how you might apply some of the learning. And obviously this is a bit meta because you're all experiencing this training session, but also taking away how will I apply this learning as a facilitator or as a trainer online. So I suppose just to say that everything that I'm doing today is designed to model online practice, hopefully good online practice. So what we'll do is have different moments throughout the session where we'll kind of press pause, and I'll give you a chance to think, okay, what am I noticing in a session? What's that experience been like? How might I do that a little bit differently to what Kate's just done for the context that I'm working in? So there'll be some opportunities, yeah, to really take stock of what you're learning as we go. So first things first, there is a map on the screen, as you can see, and if you go to the very top of the screen, you'll see a green bar that says that I'm sharing my screen with you. So just give me a thumbs up to let me know you found that. Wicked. And then if you go to the drop down menu to the right of that, there is the option to annotate. And what I would love you to do is to mark on the map where in the world you are or where in the UK you are. And you can tell I've been running this workshop a lot for a London audience, can't you? Because there's an assumption here that there also needs to be a London map. And actually, obviously, in this workshop, we've got a much bigger spread. But you can use a stamp, which I've seen people do. You can, yeah, circle where you are. But I'd love just to get an idea of where everyone is in the world. Awesome. Yay. What a lovely spread. And Lucy, this is probably a great moment to get a screenshot if you want to use this to say this is kind of the reach of the workshops. A really, really lovely range. Wicked. Just a couple more seconds. Lovely to see so many people. Fantastic. I'm also really pleased the Southwest is so well represented because I am from Devon, so I rate that. Lovely. I'm going to clear all those drawings and, oh, there we go. Move along. Okay, so now we've got a sense of who's here. We're going to do a quick poll. So I'm going to ask Gweno to launch the poll for me. There'll be a question on the screen, and all you do is select the answer that most applies to you. So hopefully you can see that. So what do you want? What do you most want and need from today's training? Just to get a sense of, in the room, what are we hoping to get out of the session? Cool, so just a couple more moments. Lovely. And so now you should be able to see the results. So we've got lots of people wanting to soak up any learning they've got, a few people wanting to connect with each other, and a large proportion of you keen to understand Zoom's tricks and hidden skills. Guess what, guys? We're going to do it all. All of your needs will be met, I promise. So that's fab. Thank you so much for doing that. So that's really helpful. We're going to start by thinking about some of your experiences before we move on later on to thinking about Zoom tips and tricks as well. But first things first, we are going to co-create some ground rules. So thinking about what you need from each other in the session. The way we're going to do this is use a Google Doc. So this is going to be a bit of an experiment because I've never done this with so many people before, but I wanted to share it with you because it is a really helpful tool for you to use with your groups when you want to get everyone's input. So Gweno is going to pop in the chat box a link to a Google Doc that you should all be able to access. You can either click on it directly or you should be able to copy and paste it into your browser. And I'll just share my screen with you so you can see what it will look like. So I'll just give you a second to take a scan through what's written. There's some really lovely themes about sharing ideas, sharing with each other, and there's definitely going to be lots of opportunity to do that. Requests for kind of honest reflection, lots of stuff about respecting each other's experiences and differences. Definitely we can all commit to that, I'm sure. Clear chairmanship to recognise when someone wants to say something. That's a lovely one, Juliet, thank you. And hopefully that hands up functionality will help with that. This has been a really good live learning for me because, as you can probably see, it's quite hard to effectively gather and facilitate this many kind of suggestions for the ground rules. So hopefully that's a good demonstration of learning in some way. I'm sorry that I'm not going through all of those comments, but I guess it's something to think about if you are facilitating for those bigger groups, how you make sure there's really sufficient time to support everyone to get the chance to have their voices heard when we're setting those ground rules. I'm going to take inspiration from some of what I've read and press pause at this moment to see if there are any questions so far on what we've done since we first started. So if there's anything you want to ask or any comments you want to make, you can just go like this to show me that you'd like to say something. Val, go for it. Just remember to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay. Just a couple of things. One of the things that I'm really struggling with, which you did very easily earlier, was to take a screenshot of the screen, because we try and take a screenshot of every event for our funders, really, to prove that people attended. How did you do that? Because I know it's really simple, but I just can't work it out.
I actually didn't do it. I told Lucy to do it, so I delegated. But on my computer, so I've got a MacBook on my computer. You can there's a shortcut, so you can do Command Shift and hash, or you can use screenshot functionality. So different computers have different ways to do that. It looks like Gweno's just asking you what computer you have, and she'll give you some advice about how to do those screenshots.
Yeah, okay.
And was there something else you wanted to ask as well?
Pardon?
Was there something else? You said there were a couple of things.
Yes, the second thing was that when we were filling in the Google Doc, I really struggled to get my machine to actually start to input the text. Was anybody else having the same problem, or was it just unique?
Some people are giving thumbs up and some people are shaking their heads, so it sounds like a different experience. I think what I would say about using Google Docs, I've run this workshop quite a few times now for different organisations and for the public as well. And what I would say is it's really helpful to give sufficient time to let people find that document, have the time to actually input on it. If they're using their phones, sometimes it can take a bit longer. And I think on reflection, this live learning is probably with a group of around 30, which we've got today. It's probably just isn't the most efficient way to get that input. Thanks, Val. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Alison, go for it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I'll be honest, I've never used Google Docs before. How easy is it to set one up, and how do you make sure that everyone's then able to go in and add their own thing into it?
Great question. Thanks, Alison. So I'm going to share my screen with you and demonstrate that. I find Google Docs very easy to use. And what you can see over here is this share button. So when you click that, it gives you the option to either let anyone on the internet with that link edit it, or you can make it a private document. So you have the options here to change whether you want people to be able to just view it, to be able to comment on it, or to have editing rights. And I think Google Docs is pretty intuitive. You can use docs, slides, Excel sheets, anything at all like that. And it's quite a nice way to get live collaboration to take place. So yeah, that's why I like using it.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna move back into the content now, but I'll make sure we press pause again in a bit for some more questions. All right, so we've got a sense of some of the needs in the room around today's workshop and what we need from each other. The next thing we're going to do is have a moment of pause with our cameras off. The invitation is to turn your camera off just to get a bit of a break from looking at the screen, and also to give yourself a little bit of space. And all I want you to do is to think back to 10:30 or just before 10:30 when you first logged in for this meeting. What are all the things that you've noticed about the experience of the session, how you felt about different things that took place, good or bad? It doesn't just have to be what you liked, but what are you noticing about the experience of this virtual environment that might be useful for you? And I'm just going to give you a couple of moments reflection, and then we'll come back together and share some of that. So last 20 seconds, and if you're done, you can turn your camera back on and come back into the metaphorical room. Okay, 2 minutes up. So I'd love to throw this over to you if anyone wants to share anything in terms of reflections that they've been capturing so far. Would anyone like to share what they wrote down? Sian, I saw your hand first.
Hi, I just wrote down I joined at, I think it was 10:27, taking up the tips of joining a little bit before, but I found myself having the kind of same anxiety you get sometimes when you go to like a networking event and you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, everyone's already in groups chatting. And I did do a call a couple of nights ago. Again, people I didn't know, but someone had started the meeting, the host, just with music playing. And it was kind of like a comedy song, and it kind of settled you in to feel like you weren't kind of the outsider. I don't know if anybody else had that feeling. Maybe it's just my own internal anxieties, but as soon as it started, it kind of you did a really good job of settling me and probably everybody else into knowing what was going on. So thank you.
No worries, that's such a lovely reflection. And I really get that. I get that really badly when I walk into rooms and people are already chatting. I'm like, oh, I'll just make a cup of tea for 15 minutes by myself. So I really get that. And I think music can work really well. So you can share your computer sound through Zoom, which means that the music plays out of your computer as if you were listening to it, which is really nice. Love that, Sian, thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to come to Sophie and then Gareth and then Jacqueline.
It's just realising what a strangely intimate place this is on Zoom, even though we're all obviously scattered across the country. It's like I've all invited you into my home, basically, and my daughter's sitting over there, and there's all these domestic things happening at the same time. And that's quite odd, because obviously normally when you go to a workshop, you've left your house for a start.
Yeah, really hear that, Sophie. Thank you. And it's a really useful thing, I think, to empathise with, connecting with that's what it might be like for the participants that you're holding online spaces for as well. Thank you. Gareth, do you want to unmute yourself? Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
I think with this meeting and what I've noticed with a lot of meetings over time, as we've developed kind of through the lockdown and these spaces have become more common, is that people are getting much more comfortable and sophisticated with it. So I think the coming in early bit today didn't hold the same kind of anxiety as it might have done 8 weeks ago. I think people have got a lot more used to the space and a lot more used to the weirdness of looking directly into 25 faces, which you wouldn't naturally do around a meeting table or in a workshop. Following on from that, I think moving from that social gathering at the beginning into things like shared screens and the polls was really useful for kind of going, and now we're in and now we're getting into it. So it really helped make that kind of mental shift towards the activity, I think.
Thanks, Gareth. They're lovely reflections. And I agree. I think it's amazing how quickly lots of the world seems to be learning to exist in this virtual environment. And it does feel like there's a lot of adaptation taking place really quickly. Thank you. Jacqueline, you had your hand.
Thank you. Sophie, thank you for sharing your point. I live and work alone at home, and I have done for a very, very long time. And nothing intrudes on what I do. And it was so interesting for me to hear you share about, you know, you've got your daughter in the corner and family stuff going on. That was a very profound sharing for me, as was yours, Sian, because it can be intimidating walking into a room. I think my comments I'd like to share are from a long-time trainer's perspective that I've observed here, because it's so weird. You mentioned in the workshop the other day, Kate, you haven't got the energy exchange, have you? And I think what you're doing here is very much trying to recreate the face-to-face format through here, in terms of eliciting expectations through the poll, you know, and making sure that everyone is on the page with the ground rules that as a trainer you'll have in your head, but creating that same degree of collaboration. And I think the biggest takeaway I've taken out of this in terms of facilitating it is you have Gweno with you to help you. I think that's also key, because it's very difficult to be both doing all the back-end tech stuff and the facilitation as well. That stretches me, because my brain just can't stretch to that. But also I think numbers are quite critical, aren't they? Yeah. I would think for myself, I don't think I would want to go beyond this, what we have here of 30 people.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting point, Jacqueline, and Lucy and I actually talked about this for this workshop. So normally I would cap a workshop like this at 12 people. Yeah. And actually, because we wanted it to reach more people, we wanted to have a bigger amount of people, basically. But it does change the experience. It does change how much everyone's voice is able to be heard in the time that we've got. It changes the types of interactions taking place. So yeah, I really hear that point. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so, oh, Kate, was that a hand? Yeah, Kate and then Val.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the time that you're giving us to reflect about everything, and the fact that it's so interactive means that it is engaging, so that's really good. What I am wondering is it possible to get the chats, the words that have been written into chats as a document of some description, or is it just virtual and there as it is now?
You can save it. So it's a setting on the Zoom meeting, like you kind of have to turn it on or off, whether the chat can be saved. So Lucy, I'm going to leave that to you and Gweno to figure out if that's all right. Are you thinking for this meeting specifically, Kate, or for generally?
Both, because I think Gweno's putting some really good hints and tips in there, and I don't want to miss them. So otherwise, there's too much going on. You can't possibly be listening in, giving everybody that time, as well as jotting down all these hints and tips.
Okay, great. Gweno, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, why don't I collect them all and collect the link, and then it can be emailed back out to everyone afterwards. Does that sound all right?
That'd be brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Crystal.
Thank you. And yeah, just to say on the point around Gweno, which I forgot to respond to on what Jacqueline said. So before I started running online workshops during lockdown, the most valuable thing I did was run dress rehearsals with friends, where I would like, you know, practice run, and that's what taught me that actually it would have been really helpful to have someone in tech support role. And now I feel like I can't do workshops without Gweno. So yeah, I really recommend that. It's we'll talk about this a bit more later, but there are a lot of things to hold when you're facilitating online, in terms of time keeping, technology, all of those different elements. So I personally have found it really kind of foundational to have that extra person sharing some of that. Val, I'm going to come to you, and then we're going to go back into the content. Val, go for it.
Okay, well, I think Kate's covered one of my questions, which was around how we captured the chat. So thank you for that and comments. But from an observational point of view, from the workshops that we're running, I've got 16 to 20 people in a workshop or an event, a virtual hub we're calling them, and they all suffer from anxiety. So for me, I don't want to exclude anyone, so we're trying to up the numbers so that we can spread them out. But the big thing for us is in a face-to-face thing, the visual clues of someone who's having a bit of a meltdown, for me, very obvious. The empathy presents it. What I'm having to do is relearn how to identify those triggers in people on screen, so that we always do it in twos with a colleague. One of us opts out for a moment to go and pick that person up if they've left the screen or if they've actually left the event, just to make sure that they don't need any support. And that's quite a different new skill that you're reading just from head and shoulders, whereas I use body language a lot normally. So it's quite a different experience, isn't it?
Yeah, that really resonates, Val, and I'm sure there'll be other people who are working in similar contexts that might resonate with that as well. And I think not only is that a new skill to kind of be able to take in and absorb all the stuff that's happening, it's also exhausting in a way that, like, in person doing that isn't. So it sounds like you're building in some good mechanisms for that checking in, which is great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
All right. In terms of what we have done so far, just a little recap. So just a few of the things that we did just to capture. So we did that annotation on the map, and I saw in the chat afterwards, not all of you were able to do that. It is, it's only accessible on some types of computers. So I think if you've got a Chromebook, it doesn't work. We also didn't do that, but a really nice tool if you're doing a check-in where everyone is speaking is passing the baton. So for example, I might say something, then I could say I'm going to pass the baton to Jacqueline, and then Jacqueline will check in. And that can be a really nice way to keep the pace when you've got lots of people. I didn't do a check-in in full today because with this many of us, it would have taken the whole session probably, but it's a nice tool. We used a poll to get consensus on how we wanted to use the session. We used Google Docs to create some of those ground rules. And we had some of that quiet time with the cameras off, which can be a really nice way to just take a bit of a pause and also have a break from looking at the screen. So the next thing we're going to do is to give you guys some time to share with each other your experience of facilitating in the context that you're working in now, and your experience of virtual versus in person. So the question that I would love you to explore, we're going to put you in breakout rooms shortly, is what powerful online learning or virtual facilitated experiences have you had, and what made them effective? Now, don't worry about remembering that, because I'll make sure I send it to you in the breakout rooms as well, so you've got it to look at. So Gweno is going to put you in breakout rooms. A square will come up on the screen inviting you to join a breakout room. So you click join. You'll then find yourself in a room with a couple of other people. So feel free to introduce yourself, share a little bit about where you are in the world, and then just begin to explore what have been the powerful learning experiences you've had online and what made them effective. And then we're going to have about 7 minutes to talk about that, and then we're going to come back together before we move on. Can I get a thumbs up to check that all sounds okay and makes sense? Awesome, thanks. I really enjoy having a whole screen of people give me a thumbs up. It's great for my self-esteem. Awesome. Okay, so Gweno is going to put you in breakout rooms. I'm going to make sure you have that question as well. Hello. You get the gold stars for returning first. Hello, hello. Great, everyone is returning. Lovely. Thanks, everyone. How was your breakout room experience? Did you enjoy it? Lots of thumbs up, wicked. So I'd love to get just a couple of bits of feedback from your discussions. It'd be really nice to hear from people who haven't spoken yet, if you'd like to, just to get a sense of, yeah, what were some of the themes that were coming out about those meaningful, effective online facilitated experiences. Would anyone like to go like that and share? Marie, I can see you.
Hello. In our group, there's the 3 of us, and the 2 other ladies were very, very new to Zoom. Whereas, as Sam knows, I've quite been a bit of a too much Zoom fatigue. Anyway, two powerful things. One is that we support unpaid carers, so people that are caring for family members. And in one of our first round of attempting to do forums, a carer said to us, to the group, now everyone knows how I feel when I can't get out. And this is now a way that I can get involved in things and be heard, and that was hugely powerful. And that makes me think that we'll probably keep Zoom going on even when we can get together. We'll probably, it'll always be now a thing that we'll use. And the second one, which was powerful, was Sam did a quiz night, and she did amazing tricks. I'm not confident to give them a go, but she did the Google Forms. She did like a music round with clips and a movie round, and put all these things together. And there was lots of tricks, and she put us all into teams by rooms as well. And there was a lot of people. I think there was 15 teams in the end that she'd done a hell of a lot of prep for it, and managed us all really well. But it was a really lot of fun, and it's probably like the most I've connected to some of my friends. The longest we've actually spent talking together one Friday evening.
Awesome, Marie.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much. And yeah, Sam, amazing tales. And what really strikes me about those two examples that you gave was that actually what was powerful was those people coming together, rather than it being any particular kind of technique of how it was facilitated or what was done, even though it sounds like that quiz was pretty rad. Actually, what was powerful was that opportunity and space for connection, which is a really nice reflection to hold on to. Thank you, Marie. Anyone else? Sue, hi.
It's not actually what, it was just Val and I in a group together, and we had an amazing discussion, and that we didn't actually get round to talking about what the question was, but it was very useful. Anyway, a couple of things. I run singing things, and a band I sing with, an a cappella band. We decided that even though Zoom is really bad for singing, because we sing a cappella in harmony, which is like nightmare on Zoom. So we've felt that we wanted to do it anyway, just to keep in touch and connect. And we've been playing around with things you might be able to do on Zoom musically. And what's been so good, we have been in guffaws of laughter most of the time. And actually just that as a release, apart from anything else, has been really useful to stay in touch. And we're now going through The Sound of Music, every single song each week, which is not the sort of stuff we normally do, with me singing or one of them and everybody else mute, in their kitchen or wherever they are, singing at the top of their voice, probably getting it all wrong, you know. And but it's very interesting. So that's one. It has been really helpful to continue our relationship in that way. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to say, I suppose it's a sort of advert for something, nothing to do with me, but I took part in the London drawing groups, Matisse paper cutting thing. I'm not artistic, but it really inspired me. And the way that was created as a whole thing was fantastic. Working backwards, the very last bit was that the goodbye bit I always think is really hard, because you suddenly go from this to your own reality. And they'd used a clip from Laurel and Hardy, the goodbye clip of them all going goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. So it gently allowed you to go back into your own space. And the other thing was she used lots of, she had music going on the whole time, just one person giving the instructions, and then you could only use, well, it was easier just to use the chat to ask any questions so that we could focus on what we were doing with this paper cutting. I loved it. I just loved it. I had such fun. My downstairs toilet is going to be full of all these Matisse impersonations.
That's so lovely, Sue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I found that it was the variety was lovely.
Yeah, that variety of activity. That's a really lovely reflection. Thank you. And there's questions and comments in the chat about hiding self-view, which if you haven't discovered will transform your life. So you can hide your own photo, so you can just see the people you're talking to and not get distracted by your own face. Ooh. She says, like, as if that's ever happened to me. It happens all the time. So what I'm going to do now, it's just before 11:25. I'm going to talk through a few kind of key things to think about in terms of designing and delivering sessions. Then we're going to take a quick break. And inspired by all your comments about music, I think I'll play some music in the break, and then we'll come back and move on to the rest of the session. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, great.
Okay.
So thinking about design, delivery and follow-up of sessions, and actually some of the things you've mentioned so far speaks to this. This next section is going to be me chatting, but I'm going to keep it as brief as possible. So just a heads up that that's what's going on, but then I'll shut up for a bit, I promise. So first things first, things to think about in terms of design of online spaces or sessions. The first thing to think about, without stating the obvious, is the purpose of that session. So why is it that you're meeting? Why is it that you're coming together? And the reason why I think this is so important for online spaces is that, as we've mentioned already, we can experience this kind of Zoom fatigue or Zoom exhaustion, as I heard the other day, which is this idea that, like, you know, we might feel quite overwhelmed by these online spaces. Some people might feel like they really need them. Other people might feel like they're inundated with opportunities to be in spaces online. So just being super clear and upfront about why you're getting together and what the purpose of that time together is for. Number of participants, which we've talked about already. Obviously, thinking about the number of people you've got is going to dictate what kind of participation and engagement can take place. Thinking about resources and visuals, making sure that everyone is able to access those things that you're using. Something that I've seen work quite well is asking people to bring along an object as part of a check-in round. So an object to represent how they're feeling about lockdown that week, or a similar thing like that. So thinking not only about resources that you're providing for use in the session, but actually what can people bring from their own homes. Pre-work, so how can you save time in the meeting or the session? And I guess this is speaking more to like training sessions or meetings, but thinking about what you can get people to come to a session having done. So if you're having a social meetup, you know, with the group that you meet with regularly, can you get them to prepare something that they come along and then use in the meeting, which helps to maintain that pace and also helps people come ready having thought about something. The structure of the session, so this is your point, Sue, about that variety of types of engagement. And then finally, this idea of a soft arrival, or however you want to call it, but this idea of the Zoom room being open for some time before the session officially starts. And it sounds like for some people that can be quite an angst-inducing thing, and for some people that can be a really nice way to start the session. So obviously be conscious of how you can meet the needs of the different people you're working with, but there's an option there to kind of give some space before the session begins. So that's in terms of things to think about before the session. Things to think about in session, lighting and background. This is like a really simple thing. As you can see, I'm sat in front of a white wall. My other option of where I can sit in my house is in front of a window, which actually can make it really difficult to see my facial expressions, my features. So I always choose to sit here because it's just a bit of a clearer image. And again, just thinking about that kind of thing, how easy is it for people to engage with you? Thinking about the expectations during the meeting or the session. So not only kind of thinking about ground rules and behaviour, but also those things we talked about at the start. What do people do if their tech falls out? What do people do if they want to say something? Has everyone got the same expectation around mute, cameras on, all of that kind of stuff, but being really clear and upfront about those expectations. And I found that at the beginning of working online, it felt quite dictatorial to give so much space and time. So this is how we're going to behave. But actually what I found is that it enables people to participate better because we've given space and time to those expectations. Thinking about energy and breaks in the session. Thinking about roles. So if you're working with other people or if you've got a group that you know well, can you get people to take on different roles and responsibilities so you're not having to do everything? So someone keeping time, someone making notes, tech support, someone keeping an eye on the energy watch, which was what someone spoke to earlier about keeping that eye out for people who might be struggling in the session, whether that's emotionally or just feeling bored and knackered. And then summarising regularly throughout the session, particularly if it's a session that focuses on lots of information, making sure that you're really giving space and time to that regular summarising. Any outputs of the session, so what do people get or do as a result of getting together, and are you going to co-create something in the session that then they will receive afterwards? And finally, what's your plan B if the tech drops? So always having a plan B in place. And then lastly, things to think about after the session. So again, Sue, you sort of spoke to this just a moment ago, but lots of people talk about the contrast they experience between being in an online space with a group like this and then coming off that call and being returned to their reality. And this particularly might be difficult for people who live alone, and that might be their heightened point of engagement in terms of socializing in the day. So being conscious of that contrast and who it might impact, and thinking about how you can set up support mechanisms for those people. So that might be a soft exit at the end of the session, or some social time at the end of the session. It might be a check-in call afterwards if it's people that you're working with regularly, but making sure that there is some thought going into what happens when the session ends. And then finally, thinking about capturing learning. And I say this, take this with a pinch of salt, because I think sometimes with this whole experience of COVID-19, there can be a need to make everything productive and a source of learning, which can feel quite stressful. But having said that, you might find with the groups or organisation that you work with and you're using an online space, that you do learn stuff about how the people you work with engage, about their needs, about what you like and dislike as a facilitator. And there is value in capturing that in some way so it can serve you better in the future. And I do really believe that actually this kind of shift to online environments is allowing us to reach and connect with more people who might otherwise not be able to access services and organisations. So that feels like an important, powerful thing. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I am going to play a song, and when the song is over, we will come back together to continue after the break. So feel free to turn your cameras off in this little break, go and get tea, go to the toilet, whatever you need to do, and we will reconvene and start again when the song has stopped playing. Okay, so come back into the room if you're not already. The song, I put it in the chat, was The Water by Johnny Flynn and Laura Marling. I think it's a lovely tune. Welcome back. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit revived. I know that was quite a short break. So we're going to do an energizer now that is a collaborative energizer. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and this time it will be the whiteboard. And just as before, if you go to the top of your screen where it says that I'm sharing and you click that downward arrow to find the annotate button, what I'm inviting you to do is a collaborative mindful drawing. So once you found that annotate button, a bar should come up with the same options as when the map happened. And the invitation is just to co-create whatever you want on this whiteboard. There are no guidelines for this drawing. Sometimes I challenge people to draw a dinosaur, but actually today I thought it'd be nice to just do a collaborative mindful drawing. Draw whatever you like. Lovely little sun. So this is just to help us arrive back in the room and create something beautiful together. Look at all those colours. I don't know if the Eden Project have ever thought about us as brand consultants, but I'm seeing some excellent options here for a new logo, maybe.
I just saw the question mark option on the stamp and was like, oh, I could put this in a couple of places.
I love it. The mermaid is epic. That's so cool.
The mermaid is amazing.
Yeah, smashed it. What's really cool about this is you never know who's doing what, which I really enjoy. So I'm just going to give you another 20 seconds or so And I'm going to make sure I save this so I can send it to you afterwards, so you've got a record of your masterpiece. Wow, that eye is so cool as well. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop annotating. I have saved that. That is gorgeous. Lovely. Nice work, everyone. So what we're going to do now, we're fully arrived back in the room. We've got just over 20 minutes left of the session. There were a couple of things we were going to do. We were going to talk about tips and tricks for engagement of groups. But actually, what I'm sensing might be more helpful is to give you some more time in breakout groups with each other to continue to share some of your stories around best practice and your experiences and reflections around how to facilitate online with groups. So what I thought I would do is put us back into breakout rooms to give us some time for that before we come back to close the session. Can I get a thumbs up if I'm sensing that that would be what you'd like? Does that feel good? I'm seeing some options. Okay. If anyone would prefer a different way to use the next 10 minutes, would anyone like to jump in with a suggestion about what they'd like? I'm just scrolling through to make sure. Juliet.
Hello. I'm very proud of my mermaid now. Thank you, everybody, for your thumbs up on the mermaid. I would really be interested to hear the sort of anecdotal games or tips from everybody about the way they've perhaps been surprised by things that have worked on Zoom. So, for example, the reason I drew a mermaid is because I had a Zoom chat with some friends' children yesterday, and the little girl was reading The Singing Mermaid, and so we found a reading of it online, and then we annotated. We used the whiteboard to annotate drawings together, and it was sort of part of her learning, but it was a really nice way to interact. So we were watching together a YouTube video of somebody else reading the book, and then annotating on the whiteboard, and then we ended up doing a bit of craft and cutting things out together. So it was a really surprising thing that I didn't know worked. That I think what's happening with Zoom for everybody is that we're just trying things out and seeing what works and what doesn't. And I'd love to hear a range of ideas of things that have worked for people already in this session. The music at the beginning, all of your tips, Kate, have been fantastic, but everybody's comments have been really interesting about the things that have helped. You know, the going and checking on somebody if you're running a thing with a group of anxious people. That was a terrible way of putting it, sorry.
No, that's really,
been so many really useful tips.
Lovely. So I think then what I'm going to do is give you the option to either go into a breakout room in small groups and have that discussions, or to stay in the room here and just have an open discussion with whatever comes up, sharing ideas and questions. So if you'd like to go into a smaller group discussion, which is perfectly fine, could you put your hand up like that and keep it there so that Gweno can see who wants to be in those smaller groups? And otherwise, you can stay in the room here and we'll have a whole group discussion. So if you would like to go in the smaller groups, hand up like that. Otherwise, we'll stay in the smaller group. Gweno, how are you doing? Have you got what you need?
So just to double check, I don't think anyone's put their hand up, so that means that everyone is happy to stay in the large room.
Lovely. Okay, great. Can I just check, Tracy, you had your thumb up. Was that because you wanted to go into a breakout room? Maybe Gweno, maybe you can check in with Tracy and just check in that she's okay. Thank you. All right, fab. So just to recap that question from Julia, it sounded like what you were asking was you'd love to hear from the room some kind of tips and tricks and ideas of any games, energizers, bits and bobs like that, that people have really found to be useful. Have I summarized that correctly? Fab. So over to the room, I'm seeing Val's hand first.
Well, this is a bit of a cheat really, but we've gone into a collaboration with Spode for the British Ceramics Biennial, and we did lots of clay work with them before lockdown. For people with anxiety, it was brilliant, but they decided to give us their artists for the duration, and we've just finished a 6-week block of mindful drawing with them, and it's been absolutely stunning, and the way that people have responded to it has been just wonderful. And it starts off with a 2-minute session where you make marks on a piece of paper, and it can be the back of an envelope, it can be anything. Nobody's expected to get major resources. And then we move into drawing in a journey where you went on your walk and drawing it and putting some symbols up. And it lasts an hour, and at the beginning we score people as to where their anxiety is, and at the end we score them again, and it's plummeted. And for us that's a really good thing, and then they can take it away and do more of it themselves, and we discuss how that's helped. Don't know whether that helps anyone or not, but
Val, thank you for sharing that. That's lovely. Alison,
can I just ask how you Val, how do you score the anxiety, because obviously, you know, you'll want to keep that between you and each individual. So how do you facilitate that scoring?
Okay, the first week it was a bit hesitant, but what the artist does is she holds up a piece of paper with a 1 to 10, and people can either say out loud where they are, with 1 being very chilled and 10 being very anxious. And then if they don't want to do that, they can just chat privately to her and send it to them, and then she holds up the same piece of paper with 1 to 10 at the end, and they recap, and then she asks everybody if they mind sharing it, and no one ever does, because the trust is building each week.
And just to add to that, the other thing that you can do which works quite well is the annotate functionality that we've used today. What's quite nice about that, yeah, Rose has just put the same thing in the chat, that you could use the whiteboard, or you could have on the screen a slide from 0 to 10, or, you know, different emotions or smiles, and get people to annotate that where they are on the line. And obviously it's anonymous, which can be another way. The other thing I would say around that is it's worth thinking about how to kind of co-create that with your group. So say, you know, we'd like to be able to check in with how you're feeling. How would you like to do that? And almost create it with them. But thank you, Val. Thank you, Alison. Any other ideas or suggestions of things people have seen?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Juliet, I just love stupid fun rather than learning fun, so I'm really sorry, but I'm sure you will find a way to turn this into learning. But just a few things that that I've tried out. So I had a game of I Spy the other day with adults and children. So because we've got the lovely backgrounds of our homes behind us, people really loved looking at what was behind people, and we had a little game of that. And it also encourages people to be familiar with using their video, because they're not focused on themselves then, they're busy looking behind people, so that makes people feel comfortable. I've done things like a Mexican wave. I tried that out, which worked, and I did that by, when you're the host, you can change people's name. So I just put the numbers in front of the people's names so they know what number they were, and then I just read out the numbers, and as I read them out, they did the wave. It only works on your screen as the host, but then you can share that video back with them afterwards. So I just pressed record and showed them how it looked afterwards. So that was good fun. I've done catchphrase. We've made a PowerPoint presentation of catchphrase, so, and I'm happy to give that to anybody that wants that, to try it out with your people. And the other thing I've done is just a little icebreaker, a team game of, so we'd all be in this space, and our challenge would be to count to 10 consecutively. But if 2 people shout the number at the same time, then we go back to the beginning. So just encouraging people to use their voice at the beginning of a session without asking them anything arduous. I think that's enough for now.
I love that, Sam. Thank you so much. And actually, this is making me think, I wonder, Lucy, whether there could be a collaborative Google document where people capture these ideas and activities afterwards. It feels like we're almost co-creating like the world's best facilitation guide. Juliet, there's a lot of good vibes for that. Yes, please collab Google Doc. So let's think about how we can do that afterwards. And I just wanted to pick up on, there was a question from Marie in the chat about safeguarding tips. that feels like quite a big question to address now, but Marie, let's connect afterwards, because I do lots of work with kids, so I'm happy to pick up that conversation with you separately. Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. Any other ideas? I'm seeing Sian's hand, and then I'll come to Sue. Sian, first of all.
Hi, it's not as fun as all of these other examples, but on a big talk lecture that I was on, they used something called Slido, which was like a kind of which words are being said the most. So they asked for, you know, who do you think of when you think of the best person at, you know, well, for me it's farming or ecology, and then the names ping up and it's alive, and they just had it for about 2 minutes, and it was, you know, anonymous, which I think is good. It gives you something to engage with, and then they kind of, it's usable afterwards. So I thought that was quite handy. So I think it's called Slido. I'll try and put the link in the chat.
Awesome, thank you, Sian. Sue.
It was actually a question or a competence. It's to do with when people come on. I'm talking about people being anxious. I know I get quite anxious before with a new one, because I don't know what the format is going to be. Is it going to be a live interactive thing? Am I going to be expected to speak? Is it like with the drawing one I told about, the Matisse one? She was just up in the corner. And we could be seen, and it was just chat. And I find it really useful to know in advance. Otherwise, do I put my makeup on? Can I sit here in my pajamas? You know what I mean? And it's interesting. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really good point. And I think that I've seen people do it in different ways, like send out information pre-session being, this is what you can expect, this is how it's going to be, and similarly waiting until the session to kind of set that outline. So I think that's a really good thing to think about, and again, maybe working with your groups to work out what would be best. Alison.
Yes, so I do a bit of that, sort of setting up beforehand what's expected. The trainees that I work with, I sent them out a guide on just some of the basics. So just saying, remember that people will see you on the screen, let your household know that you're going to be on screen. And then I had a picture that just said no pajamas, but I didn't actually say that in it. So it was just kind of keeping it quite light-hearted. I also sent them all through a Zoom guide. There's an easy read version on the Welsh Learning Disability site that is fantastic. So we sent that out to everybody. And at each session, we are, as well as the chat that's going on and showing each other what we've done as part of the activities we've set up, we also learn 2 new Zoom skills every week. So I'm digitally upskilling all of my young people, because this is going to be a new normal. They're going to need to be doing a lot of these things if we have a second occurrence. What I want is that they are doing this in quite a sociable setting. So we did fun polls like, do you like crisps or chocolate better? So it was an either or. No, there was 3 choices. There was a choice to say none. And then the next poll that we did was building on that, so they could pick more than one option. So that was, what are the things that you've done during lockdown? Tick all that apply. And I teach 2 skills at each one. And then at the next session, because obviously with learning difficulty, it's about just repetition. So we'll go very quickly over what we learned the week before and do a really quick activity to make sure everyone still remembers it. And then we add on a couple of new things.
I love that.
And at the very end, we do the RAMI. So during it, it's quite structured, but at the very end, we have the RAMI, which is where it's open all mics and anyone just chats and asks questions and things.
That's wicked. I love that idea of like the building the digital skills. That's awesome. So we are moving towards the last part of the session. I'm just going to give a couple more moments for people to share ideas, and then we're going to move into some final kind of independent reflection. Anything else that anyone wants to say? Kimberly, hello.
Hello. Just a couple of very quick things. If you have a repeating session, this is sort of following on from what Samantha said, but I have a group that meets every week virtually on Zoom, and we play Spot the Difference. So the first few minutes, whilst people are still joining on, whoever, normally it's the same host every week, and it's either me or a colleague, and we'll have changed something in the background. It's quite hard to see when there's lots of people. So Spot the Difference is a really quick something for people to do when they first come on, but they're a bit nervous to talk at the beginning. Another thing that we had was share the pet as a break. So I am very lucky to have chickens. So we started with the chickens, and they are a pet. So I shared my chickens in the first week, and then lots of people just said, "Oh, can we share our pets every week for 10-minute break?" So then every week somebody will share their animal or their pets, or we've had a child. Somebody shared a child. That's fine also. So just a couple of little things for either breaks or that awkward bit at the start, because there are a lot of people. I do this all the time, and even I feel awkward coming onto a new session with new people. That first 5 or 10 minutes where people are coming into the room and getting comfortable. So just a little something to lighten the mood and give people a bit of a giggle. They would be my top suggestions for that anti-anxiety moment.
Yeah, wicked. And I love to spot the difference. The beginning of lockdown, I was doing the Joe Wicks workouts. That is rapidly declined as part of my routine. But he also did that every day. It was a sick idea.
So
Kate,
basically stole it off him.
Yeah, I love it. Kate,
stole the exercise.
Yeah. Does anybody ever change their backgrounds? In terms of, let me see this. How do I do it? Settings, here we go. If my computer wants to work. But yeah, you can, the BBC have got some really good empty set pictures. And so you can be in the Queen Vic, or you can upload your own photos. So if you go into your settings within Zoom, and it's available in the free sessions, free thing. My computer's not playing games, but yeah, you can choose your own background. All you need to do is make sure you've got a plain background behind you of one colour. I would demonstrate, but my settings are not responding. So, but you can have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, you can go to the video settings, the little upward arrow next to stop video. Sam is demonstrating it for us.
Yeah.
And then if you go to choose virtual background, sometimes you need to have downloaded the latest version of Zoom, or it might be to do with what you have available on a computer. But yeah, that's quite fun. Yeah. I've also seen a similar thing where as people are arriving in the room, a prompt to change your name into something. For example, change your name for what it would be in a post-apocalyptic zombie universe or whatever, and then people do that. And then obviously it's really helpful to then change back so you know who's who on the call. But that can be quite a nice one. All right, I am gonna and I'm just gonna invite us to again turn off our cameras and to do a little bit of independent reflection. I'm just going to share my screen with you so you know the reflection prompt. So what I'd love you to think about in a moment is think about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and the action that you will take. So what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and the action you will take. So I invite you to turn off your cameras and take a minute or so to think about this, and then just to pop it in the chat so that we can all see everyone's reflections. I'm thinking, I'm feeling, the action I will take. So one more minute or so. I'm seeing so many lovely reflections in the chat. Awesome. And when you're ready, turn your camera back on. So we're back in the room. And I am wondering if we can do a little experiment. This is something I've wanted to do in every session that I've run, but I'll be honest, you're the first group that I feel like might actually be up for it, which is to take a screenshot of us all pulling a funny face into the camera, and then we can send it around afterwards. Would you be up for that? Give me a thumbs up if you're up for that. If you don't want to participate, that is fine. You can turn off your camera. There is no pressure. I just think it'll be quite lols. I am going to count us down. Okay, so I'll say 3, 2, 1, and then I'll take the photo. So let's try and do it in a coordinated way. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Guys, you've never looked better. Wonderful. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll make sure that gets shared along with your lovely mindful drawing. Thank you for all these fantastic comments. Lots of thoughts and reflections. Gweno, Lucy and I will coordinate to make sure that the links and ideas and bits and bobs get shared around. And Lucy, you've got 1 minute. I've given you a minute, that's all. But anything you want to say to sort of close the session?
That is all right. Just a huge thank you from me and from everyone on here to both you and Gweno. I think that was brilliant. And I think we all need a Kate and we all need a Gweno for every session. Maybe we'll make you compulsory as part of our sessions. Oh, thank you, everybody. So we will, as Kate says, send out follow-up notes. I will edit this recording probably next week and send you guys a link to it. Feel free to share that with anybody you know that might be interested. I'll pop a couple of more links in the chat. Pop a couple more links in the chat. So to find out more about the Big Lunch and just our Facebook page again for more events and things. And I think that is everything. Hope to see you again soon. And again, thank you to the wonderful Kate and wonderful Gweno.
Yay! Let's give Gweno some vibes into the camera. You could do the emoji or actual applause. And just to say, Lucy and I will stick around for a moment or two if you want to hang around. Obviously, feel free to then leave without any fear of awkwardness. You can just leave the meeting. Don't feel weird about it. But it would be really interesting, Lucy and I were chatting while you guys were in breakout rooms, to know if another session like this or a version of this session might be useful. So maybe get in touch with Lucy or write on the Facebook group if you think, you know, a version of this with a smaller group, for example, or something similar might be helpful for you. I'd love to carry on supporting you guys to do the great work that you're doing. Thank you so much. Happy Friday. Yes, Gary, was that a question?
It was, yeah. I just thought in terms of another session follow-up, it would be really nice to test some of the games, short exercises that people do. I think that could be really good fun, but also it's that chance to test it before you put it in front of another audience to see what works and what doesn't. I think it would be fab.
Yeah, so I've actually got a workshop that I run called Facilitate. See what I did there, guys? Facilitate. Which is exactly that. And it's a small session capped at like 5 or 6 people. The idea being that each person takes it in a turn to test run something. So we're running that, Gweno and I are running that for the 2nd time next week. With a really lovely group, and it's worked really well. So yeah, but there's definitely a version like that we could do, and it's a nice opportunity to practice. Exactly, yeah, Val, like in a safe space before you have to actually do it for real. Thank you. Shall I play a tune so you can sneak off feeling less awkward? All right, great. I'm going to do that.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.